At 51, I discovered what real betrayal feels like. Then everything changed when. At 51, I thought I understood betrayal. I'd seen it in movies, read about it in books, watched friends go through messy divorces. But nothing prepares you for the moment your wife of 18 years walks through your front door at 1:15 in the morning, reeking of cologne that isn't yours, and tells you to be grateful she even bothered coming home. That was when I learned the difference between knowing about betrayal and having it sliced through your soul like a serrated knife. The sound of her Honda Civic pulling into our suburban Columbus driveway had become as familiar as my own heartbeat over the past 6 months. Always late, always with an excuse, always carrying that particular mixture of guilt and defiance that I had grown to recognize but refused to acknowledge. Rebecca had perfected the art of making me feel like I was the problem, for caring, for waiting up, for still believing that marriage meant something more than convenient cohabitation. When she finally pushed through our front door that Tuesday night, the autumn wind swept in behind her, carrying the scent of rain and something else, something that made my stomach clench with recognition. Her auburn hair was slightly disheveled, not the way it looked after a long day at the insurance office where she claimed to work late 3 nights a week, but the way it looked after someone else's hands had run through it. She dropped her leather purse on our worn sectional couch, the same one we had bought at Ashley Furniture when we were young and optimistic and convinced that love could conquer anything. The sound echoed in the silence of our living room where I sat in my father's old recliner, a cup of coffee growing cold in my hands, watching my wife transform into a stranger before my eyes. Her heels clicked against the hardwood as she kicked them off with practiced indifference. Christian had saved up for weeks to buy her those shoes last Christmas, our 17-year-old son working double shifts at the grocery store because he wanted to give his mom something special. The memory of his proud smile when she opened that box now felt like acid in my throat. Rebecca didn't even glance in my direction. She simply stood there in our modest living room, surrounded by family photos that had become monuments to a life that no longer existed, and delivered the words that would replay in my mind for months to come. Be grateful I even showed up, Thomas. The casual cruelty of it hit me like a physical blow. Grateful. As if her presence in our home, in our marriage, in our life together was some kind of charity she was bestowing upon an unworthy recipient. As if I should feel privileged that she had torn herself away from whatever or whoever had been occupying her time to grace me with her company. I've replayed that moment 1,000 times since, and I still remember the exact way the lamplight caught the smear of lipstick on her collar. The shade was called Berry Bliss. I knew because I'd bought it for her on Valentine's Day 2 years ago. But Rebecca hadn't worn makeup in months, claimed she was too tired, too busy, too stressed to bother with such things anymore. Apparently, that rule didn't apply when she wasn't with me. For 18 years, I had been the kind of husband who noticed things. I noticed when she changed her shampoo, when she was worried about Christian's grades, when she needed space to decompress after a difficult day. I noticed because I cared, because paying attention to the person you love is what marriage is supposed to be about. But somewhere along the way, that attention had become surveillance in her eyes, that care had become suffocation, and my love had become an inconvenience. I sat there in that moment, watching her move through our home like she was marking time until she could leave again, and I felt something fundamental shift inside me. It wasn't just anger, though God knows there was plenty of that. It wasn't just hurt, though the pain was so sharp it made my chest ache. It was recognition, the dawning, terrible understanding that I had been living in a marriage by myself for longer than I cared to admit. She strutted toward our kitchen, her movements deliberate and dismissive, like she was performing for an audience she couldn't wait to disappoint. The kitchen where we used to cook together on Sunday mornings, where Christian had done his homework at the counter while we helped him with algebra, where we'd shared coffee and dreams and plans for a future that had somehow slipped through our fingers like water. Rebecca opened the refrigerator and pulled out a bottle of water, twisting the cap with sharp, agitated movements. She didn't ask about my day. She didn't notice the pot roast I had cooked hours earlier, now sitting cold and forgotten on the stove, the vegetables congealed in their own juices. She didn't see the table I had set for two, the candles I had lit and then blown out when 10 o'clock became 11, then midnight, then 1 in the morning. Instead, she glanced at the evidence of my hope, at the tangible proof that I was still fighting for something she had clearly already abandoned, and she laughed. Not a laugh of amusement or even embarrassment, but something darker, more cutting. A laugh that said I was pathetic for trying, foolish for caring, ridiculous for believing that 18 years of marriage meant something worth preserving. "You really should stop waiting up for me, Thomas," she said, her voice carrying that particular tone of condescension that had become her default mode of communication with me. "It's not healthy, this obsession you have with controlling my schedule." Obsession. Controlling. The words hung in the air between us like accusations, settling into the growing collection of grievances she had been building against me. Caring had become obsession. Wanting to spend time with my wife had become controlling. Expecting basic respect in my own home had become unreasonable. I clenched my hands around the coffee mug, feeling the ceramic dig into my palms, using the slight pain to anchor myself in the moment. Because this was it. This was the conversation we had been avoiding, the reckoning that had been building like storm clouds on the horizon of our marriage. Her phone buzzed against the granite countertop we had installed 3 years ago during happier times, when we still made joint decisions about our home, when we still used words like we and us and our future together. I saw the name flash across the screen before she could grab it. Michael. Not a name I recognized from her office, not someone she had ever mentioned in the careful, edited versions of her days she had been sharing with me lately. The way she snatched that phone, the speed with which she moved, the flash of something that might have been panic in her eyes before she composed herself, told me everything I needed to know about Michael. Her fingers moved quickly across the screen, typing a response with the kind of familiarity that comes from frequent conversation, before she slipped the device into her back pocket and turned to face me with renewed defiance. That was the moment my patience, stretched thin over months of excuses and dismissals and gradually increasing emotional distance, finally snapped. I stood up from the recliner, my movement deliberate and controlled, and I looked at my wife, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time in years. "Why should I be grateful, Rebecca?" The words came out steady, calm, carrying 18 years of accumulated disappointment and 5 decades of life experience that had taught me to recognize when something was irretrievably broken. "You don't live here anymore. You haven't for months. You're just a stranger who happens to have a key." She froze mid-step, the water bottle suspended halfway to her lips, and I saw something flicker across her face. Surprise, maybe, or shock that I had finally found my voice after months of swallowing my questions and doubts and growing certainty that the woman I had married was disappearing piece by piece into a life that didn't include me. For 18 years, Rebecca had been the one who set the emotional temperature of our home. Her moods dictated our family's rhythm. Her needs shaped our decisions. Her approval or disapproval became the metric by which I measured my worth as a husband. But in that moment, standing in our kitchen with the evidence of her deception literally buzzing in her pocket, I felt the balance of power shift. "What's that supposed to mean?" she asked, her voice taking on that carefully measured tone she used when she was buying time to construct her defense. She tilted her head slightly, a gesture that once seemed endearing but now felt calculated, designed to make me feel like I was being unreasonable for expecting basic honesty from my own wife. I met her gaze without flinching, drawing on 5 decades of life experience that had taught me the difference between a person who was genuinely confused and one who was desperately trying to maintain a lie that was crumbling around them. "It means this isn't your home anymore, Rebecca. You treat it like a hotel where you occasionally sleep between visits to wherever it is you actually want to be. You show no respect for me, for our son, for the life we built together. You come and go as you please, offering crumbs of attention when it's convenient and contempt when it's not. I'm done pretending that's a marriage." For the first time in months, I saw genuine panic flicker in her eyes. The water bottle trembled slightly in her hand as she set it down on the counter, droplets splashing against the granite surface we had chosen together in what now felt like another lifetime. Don't be dramatic, she said, but her voice lacked its usual conviction. You're overreacting. I work hard, Thomas. I'm tired when I get home. That doesn't mean I don't love you. But I wasn't buying it anymore. Not after the months of growing distance. Not after the way she started flinching when I touched her. Not after the careful way she edited her stories about work, her colleagues, her whereabouts during those long evenings she claimed to be catching up on paperwork but was clearly somewhere else. Tired people don't come home smelling like someone else's cologne, I said, stepping closer, close enough to see the way her pupils dilated with what looked like fear. Tired people don't have lipstick stains on their collars when they haven't worn makeup in months. Tired people don't get secret text messages at 1 in the morning from people their spouse has never heard of. Her face went pale, the color draining from her cheeks like water from a broken dam. She tried to scoff, to summon that dismissive laugh that had become her weapon of choice, but the sound cracked halfway through, betraying the panic she was trying so hard to hide. You're paranoid, Thomas. You always twist things, always assume the worst. Maybe that's the real problem in our marriage. The deflection was so perfect, so practiced, that I almost admired her skill. Turn the accusation back on the accuser, make the victim responsible for their own pain, transform justified suspicion into personal failing. It was a masterclass in gaslighting, and for a moment I could see how she had kept me off balance for so long. But I was done being managed, done being manipulated, done accepting responsibility for her choices, her lies, and her abandonment of everything our marriage was supposed to represent. No, Rebecca, I said, my voice carrying a certainty that surprised even me. I've twisted myself into knots for years trying to please you, trying to believe the lies, trying to hold on to something that died long before tonight. But you gave me clarity. When you told me I should be grateful you even showed up, you told me everything I needed to know about how little respect you have for me, for us, for the family we created together. She crossed her arms defensively, but I could see her hands shaking, her carefully constructed facade beginning to crumble under the weight of truth she could no longer deflect. So what? She demanded, her voice rising with desperation. You think you can just throw me out after everything we've built? After 18 years of marriage? After everything I've sacrificed? I let out a laugh, but it carried no humor, only the bitter recognition of how completely she had rewritten the narrative to cast herself as the victim and me as the villain. Everything we built? I repeated, the words tasting like ashes. Rebecca, you tore it down brick by brick. You withdrew your affection, your attention, your basic respect. You turned our marriage into a transaction where I gave everything, and you took what you wanted while looking elsewhere for what you actually desired. I didn't realize until tonight that I've been living in the ruins for months, maybe years. For the first time in our conversation, she didn't have a ready comeback. The silence stretched between us like a chasm, filled with all the words we had never said, all the truths we had never acknowledged, all the love that had been slowly suffocated by neglect and betrayal. Her phone buzzed again. Michael, presumably wondering where she was, when she was coming, what excuse she was using this time. She glanced at the device automatically, her hand moving toward her pocket before she caught herself and looked back at me with something that might have been shame. That automatic response, that instinctive reaching for another man while standing in the kitchen of the home she shared with her husband, was the final confirmation I needed. Go to him, I said quietly, pointing toward the front door. You already left me long ago, Rebecca. Tonight you just made it official. At least have the courage to stop pretending this marriage means anything to you. Her lips parted as if she wanted to speak, but no sound emerged. For once in our 18 years together, Rebecca was speechless, confronted with the undeniable truth of what she had done to us, to our family, to the future we had once planned. And for the first time in months, I felt the crushing weight on my chest begin to lift. The constant anxiety about whether I was good enough, attractive enough, interesting enough to hold my wife's attention. The endless second-guessing of my own perceptions when reality didn't match her carefully crafted explanations. The exhausting effort of trying to love someone who had clearly stopped loving me back. Rebecca's eyes darted between me and the door, as if she couldn't decide whether to fight for something already abandoned or flee to the future she had been building in secret. For 18 years, she had held all the power. Her emotions dictated our household's atmosphere, her needs shaped our decisions, her approval became the metric by which I measured my worth as a husband and father. But now, standing in our kitchen with the evidence of her betrayal buzzing in her pocket, I felt the fundamental dynamic of our marriage shift for the first time since we'd said our vows. "You don't mean that," she whispered, her voice suddenly softer, almost pleading. The defiance was gone, replaced by something that sounded like fear. "Thomas, we can fix this. We can go to counseling, we can work through our problems. We have Christian to think about, our future together, everything we've built." I shook my head slowly, drawing on 5 decades of life experience that had taught me to recognize when someone was bargaining from desperation rather than a genuine desire for reconciliation. "No, Rebecca, you can't fix something you never valued. For months, I've begged you for honesty, for intimacy, for basic respect. You gave me lies, excuses, and contempt. You made me feel like a stranger in my own home, like my love was an inconvenience you had to endure rather than a gift you wanted to treasure. That's not marriage, that's cruelty." Tears swelled up in her eyes, but I had seen those tears before. They appeared whenever she needed me to forgive, to forget, to continue playing the role of the devoted husband while she pursued whatever she actually wanted. They were a tool, not an expression of genuine remorse, and I refused to be manipulated anymore. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone, unlocking it with steady fingers before turning the screen toward her. The screenshots were all there, clear as daylight, courtesy of someone who apparently respected me more than my own wife did. Her intake of breath was sharp, filling our kitchen like a gunshot. "You went through my phone?" she demanded, her face flushing with indignation, as if invasion of privacy was somehow worse than the systematic destruction of our marriage. I smiled, but there was no warmth in it, only the cold satisfaction of finally having proof of what I had known in my heart for months. "No, Rebecca. He sent them to me. Turns out your lover has more integrity than you do. Michael felt guilty about what you two were doing behind my back. He thought I deserved to know the truth about what my wife was really up to during all those late nights at the office." The color drained from her face so completely I thought she might faint. She stumbled backward, reaching for the counter to steady herself as the full magnitude of her situation became clear. Not only had she been caught, but she had been betrayed by the very person she had been betraying me with. The screenshots told the whole story. Plans to meet at the Marriott downtown. Promises to leave me as soon as she figured out how to get half of everything in the divorce. Complaints about what a boring, controlling husband I was, how she deserved more than suburban mediocrity, how Michael understood her in ways I never could. Reading those messages had been like having my heart surgically removed without anesthesia, but they had also been liberating. They freed me from the terrible uncertainty, the constant questioning of my own perceptions, the gradual erosion of self-worth that comes from being slowly gaslit by someone you trust completely. "I can explain," she began, but I held up my hand to stop her. "You said I should be grateful you came home tonight," I said, my voice steady and calm despite the storm raging inside me. "You're absolutely right. I am grateful, Rebecca. Grateful because your arrogance finally woke me up from the nightmare of trying to love someone who had already moved on. You don't live here anymore. You never did. This house, this life, this family we created together, it's mine now. And I'm taking it all back." She stood frozen, finally understanding that the careful game she had been playing was over. The lies she had been juggling, the double life she had been maintaining, the husband she had been taking for granted while pursuing excitement elsewhere, it was all collapsing around her like a house of cards in a hurricane. I walked past her toward the front door, each step feeling lighter than the last. For months, I had carried the weight of our dying marriage on my shoulders, blaming myself for not being enough, for not trying hard enough, for not finding the magic words or gestures that could bring back the woman I had fallen in love